we'll see each other, from time to time when Josh comes back with his wife and his son Miles, and they live in Brooklyn, New York. And last week, unfortunately, we were reconnected through a conversation because a friend of ours passed away. Josh was much closer to Nick than I was. And it was unexpected. So we just kind of got into the topic of alcoholism, and he sort of shared with me when the podcast first came out, his journey to sobriety. But I would like for you, Josh, to just kind of tell your story real quick, and we'll get into this.
Yeah. My relationship with alcohol started a long time ago. I've been in restaurants, basically restaurant and wine industry, beverage industry, my entire working career, starting when I was 15. Not a drinker in high school though. Not really till later, and an average drinker in college. But I think it's the culture of restaurants, the lack of taboo, the acceptance of the drinking culture as the norm just became, over the course of 25 years, this really terrible habit for me. A learned behavior of alcohol is part of celebration. It's part of, I'm angry, I had a bad day, I'm stressed. It's my relief, it's my escape. And that for me, spiraled into something that became a very unhealthy relationship, especially for somebody, I'm pretty deep in the wine industry in terms of my career, close to the master sommelier credentials. So I have this odd juxtaposition of being very incredibly, this massive amount of respect for the industry and the wine. At the same time, on my private side, when my work is done, this dark side that I can't, or at least couldn't at the time, get away from. So I've spent a lot of years struggling with that, going back and forth, taking breaks, going back and forth, and finding how to balance this and how to get away, and got to the point. COVID was the biggest kicker of nothing to stop me. Right. And it was the realization that, through restaurants and working, and when it's convivial and there's people around you, I'm not the problem. This is the environment. Right. So I can blame it on other things. And it was COVID that made me realize not how much I can drink, how much my tolerance is, but how much I'm willing to drink. And I think that became the very frightening, scary, dark side of it. Like how much I'm willing to let myself have, or how much I can't stop myself from having, more importantly.
Welcome back. Part 1. Yes, part 1 of a 2-part episode. I sit down with my good friend Joshua Stanko from high school. We have a really interesting friendship because we went to high school together, but it wasn't until we both lived in New York City. The first time that we sort of connected in New York was at a bar. He walks in and my first thought is, "Are you even old enough to be in here?" Pretty sure I said that to him, and he laughed and we chatted. And then a week later, I was starting a new job at a restaurant, and I walked onto the line, and who was standing there? Josh Stanko. And I said, "Well, now you're stalking me." And he's like, "No, I think you're stalking me because I worked here first." So it became a amazing friendship from there on. Often it would be Josh and David, who we all call Yoda. If you don't know Yoda, you should know Yoda. Everybody should know Yoda. I don't know how many times I just said Yoda. 4. And we watched the Steeler games together. They all lived. So it was Josh, his girlfriend, Joyce, who is now his wife, and David. And I think his girlfriend at the time lived there as well. They all lived in Hell's Kitchen. So we would just hang out and we'd go watch football games and just kind of whatever when we weren't working. And Josh, back in February, actually February 5th to be exact, right after the podcast launched, sent me a message. He said, "Hey, sorry for the late message. Just got to my hotel in Gainesville. Listen to your first episode on the road. I've been sober 386 days with the help of medicine. They've absolutely saved my life. Lots of great stuff to listen to. I think you're doing an amazing thing for people who need to know they aren't alone. I hit bottom pretty hard myself too in the past couple years and have found a lot of light and happiness with sobriety and therapy this past year. I also want you to know that I love you to death and I'm so very glad you're still here. Looking forward to your next episodes. Thank you for putting yourself out there and doing what you are doing. Love and miss you." So that's, he's one of those friends where we'll go a really long time without talking to each other, and then one of us sends a message or a conversation sort of pops up anywhere. It could be anything that's going on in the world, and we just reconnect, and it's like we didn't skip a beat. I did see him and his wife Joyce and their son Miles, who is probably one of the cutest little kids I've ever seen in my life, ever. And that's no offense to anyone else who has an adorable child, but this kid's cute, not gonna lie. But most recently, we did reconnect over a friend who was much closer to Josh, but was a dear friend of mine when we lived in New York. One of the most talented singer, songwriter, musicians I've ever come across in my life, who unexpectedly passed away. And we started talking. And, Josh was feeling all the emotions because of the journey that he's gone on with his sobriety. But, our friend struggled. And part of his struggle is what, caused his body to just not be able to fight anymore. So if you're someone who is struggling, my hope is always in these episodes. And I know there's a lot of tough conversations and topics that I talk about on here, but it's necessary. There are still a lot of people who are struggling and they need hope. They need to see that there are people who are on the other side that are cheering them on, that are giving them that sense of hope. Not only that, but also that sense of community, because the loneliness that comes with substance abuse, alcohol abuse, and depression, it can be very overwhelming at times. And I know that we all recognize that that's out there, but to get back to those happy memories, those good times, that's what we need. We need these reminders. So we're going to get into this episode with Josh, and next week is going to be part 2, which was actually the first part that we recorded because we brought Dr. Brophy back on from the Geyser Center, Dr. C. Thomas, Charles Thomas Brophy. If you have never had the pleasure of meeting him, just, go to the Geyser Center and see if he's around and be like, hey, dude, just wanted to meet you. I'm one of those people that I'm like, well, let's go see him. Let's go say hi. If you know me well, you know that I'm goofy. That's why I do this in the beginning, so you can get to know me. I also want to say that I'd love for you guys to reach out to me. So if you're not already following the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Alter Eagle Podcast is the Instagram handle. Send me a message if you have a story, if you have something to share. I am looking for women-specific stories, and that could be anything. There's a lot of amazing women in this community, in this town, and I want to hear from you. So please send me a message on Instagram. You can also send me a message on Facebook, and I do want to say some of you have done that, and I've responded, and the messages keep bouncing back, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on there with that. So if you haven't heard from me, try sending me a message on Instagram, because those ones are going through and I'm able to communicate. But we're going to talk about Naltrexone next week with Dr. Brophy, and Josh also talks about the Sinclair method and an app that he's found really valuable in this journey, the Sober app. So let's get into it with Josh Stanko. Word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/altereagle. That's betterhelp.com/altereagle. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Boom, there she is.
Beautiful.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, so it's great to hear the rise in understanding and knowing in the medicine, and things like this, I hope, are something that will, so I think if the general population begins to have a better understanding that this is available, to create the conversation, because I think there's, it was for me anyway, a fear of walking into a doctor and asking for medicine.
Yeah,
it always
of course. Yeah.
Nothing, right? That it gives you an edge that is what you really want, whether it's, Adderall back in the day or whatever, you were trying to get. This has no addictive qualities. It doesn't seem to have any long-term or decades of studies with long-term effect on the liver.
That's what I wanted to ask you about the liver, because I was, reading, and it said, well, if you're comparing it to alcohol use.
Yeah, then I would take it every day. But from what I read and what I understand, please talk to your doctor. I'm going to speak always of what I understand in medicine and my experience. I've had no change in my liver numbers.
Okay, good.
My overall health, and to your previous point, liquor versus alcohol in your liver, my cholesterol in the year and a half sober has dropped 100 points. My blood sugar is just now below type 2 diabetes. I've been fighting that, not medicine for that. My blood pressure is my body health is down from 51 years old to 32 years old. I've dropped almost 50 pounds in the past year and a half. So I think that destruction of my own personal physical and mental health, not feeling like I have no life left if I can't change this, the very minimal, possibly but probably not linked to naltrexone liver or whatever problems that have been detected that can't even be directly linked to it, pale in comparison to what somebody like me. Now, maybe somebody who drinks very infrequently, but still wants to minimize, have the conversation, but they still show no link. So I think if this can get into the heads of the general public, an understanding that this is an option, would be amazing.
Well, because, you talked about the other options or the other resources that you sought, like AA, therapy, cold turkey.
Yeah.
And you kind of kept going back to this. What would you say? Because here's the thing. We jumped right in with Dr. Brophy, right? We briefly talked about how we know each other, and we can talk more. But was there because the last time I saw you was over Christmas was it 22? Was it December of 22?
Yeah. Miles was walking.
When were you guys here? Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been 22. He would have been just over.
So after that was kind of, I guess within those next 6 months was when you were
drinking. I wasn't drinking there. We were at our friend's bar. I wasn't drinking, but that was in my, I don't drink unless nobody else is in the room phase. That was really coming to the end of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So your question was, what was
I guess what was the moment where you really sort of, because you talked a little bit, and it's totally up to you, whatever you're comfortable talking about. But you did mention a little bit of having this fear of is this going to ruin my relationship? I have a son. I'm going to,
It's going to ruin my life. I had a lot of moments where, the suicide ideology, I knew I didn't want to go that path. We've all, unfortunately, I think in a growing way, everybody is touched by, suicide with somebody in their life that they know. And the question always is, how do you get there? And I know that I had moments where I was just so deep and dark where I didn't want that, but I didn't want to live like this anymore. So that hits me of oh, this is where it starts. This is where you get to the point where, God forbid. And I was like, I got to change. And I had come back from a work trip one night. It was a Friday night. I had flown home, and true to form, had 2 martinis at the airport before I fly out of Florida and get home. And, it's at the end of the workday. So I'm like, yeah, why not have a couple martinis, sit in the plane. The plane has wine, have a glass of wine. Get off the plane. I realized friends are coming over, and oh, we're going to order pizza. Great. We'll get home. We'll have, 9, 10 p.m. pizza. Well, that means we're going to open wine for them. I'm not drinking, quote unquote. So, I come home with a big old coffee, but of course, something else I picked up along the way that I can hide in the closet. And, you can finish that, and then everyone goes to bed, and I decide I'm going to have something else to drink. Before you know it, it's the morning, and I am trembling with a hangover and just feeling like absolute garbage. And this is probably the 100th day of the year that I'm feeling like that. And somehow, and just my alcoholic brain, and lack of any sort of real reasoning, just to calm the shakes, I find something to drink. It's first thing in the morning. And I tell myself, like I do every single time, this is it. I'm done. Let's calm the shakes, get through my day. I'm done. I'm done. And then the next morning I wake up trembling, hungover, and just feeling horrible. And I just, in that moment, I'm like, I'm not going to live long enough to see my son grow up. Whether it's a heart attack, whether it's just I don't wake up one morning because I've had too much. And finally, I walked out and I looked Joyce in the face. It's the hardest thing I ever did. And I just said, I'm still drunk. I'm hungover. And just the look of shock and disappointment and fear on her face. And I was like, I need help. I got to do something. Because every single day of being afraid to say that to her, because of the shame and telling myself, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to fix this. I just went straight upstairs, got on the computer, found online therapy. And by the end of the week, had my first prescription of Naltrexone. It was either that. If I couldn't find anything that day, I was leaving the next morning. I was going to go to rehab. And if it meant losing my job, and if it meant starting over, it is what it is. I knew about this medicine. I'd heard about it on podcasts before. I realized that this company does it. And I'm like, I'm just going to try it, because the other dark side of it is, I need my job. My job is in the alcohol industry, but I need to support my family. Mm-hmm. It's my last step before I had to make a big change. And the night and day change to it. I mean, that first week is brutal for anybody who's gone through it. It is really, really hard. I mean, that was the willpower week of waiting to get the medicine and then waiting for it to come in and making sure that I thought of every single waking day, I have this medicine, let it work, please let it work. Mm-hmm. And every day just got easier and better. And I remember it was about a week and a half into the medicine that I was away on my first trip, and there was a big dinner I was hosting, and I'm the one talking about, hosting everybody, 65 people. And it's a lot of this in the back of my head, wheels turning that nobody else knew. And just not touching anything and making sure that I send the glass away, take that away from me. I don't need that. Somebody at one point at the dinner said, "Oh, you're not even drinking anything." And I'm just like, well, I'm on the road and I'm hosting. I don't drink while I work, which is probably the least true thing in my career, right? Because bartending and everything.
Yeah.
Whenever it was true in that moment. And then the next morning I woke up at the hotel and realized I got home and didn't think about anything. Like stopping at the hotel bar didn't cross my mind for the first time. The trigger did not turn on. And I just realized, okay, I think there's hope. I'm not going to get ahead of myself here, but I think there's hope. I think this is working for me.
I love that. I'm very proud of you, by the way. And just like Dr. Brophy said too, is coming on here and talking about this and sharing your story, because yeah, I mean, we worked together in the service industry, and it was a coping mechanism. I mean, it was our only way to feel like we had any type of life, right? Because by the time we got out of work, what was there to do? Well, there was only one option.
I worked in other restaurants where it was just the norm. As you know, you go through turns in a restaurant, you do 4 seatings in a night. Between every turn, everyone gets to the bar, have a drink real quick, and then go for your next one. It was, that we're all in it together, and the normalization of it over time. And I think early in your, for those listening, early in your 20s, be conscious of what you're doing. Yes. Think about yourself. And if you have the same thoughts that I had, please listen to them. Maybe go talk to your doctor and ask about this. Also, don't beat yourself up. There is a bit of having fun in your 20s, but be very aware of what you're doing. There's something to be said for having fun in your whole life, of course, but be very aware of what you're doing and find a way to remove the stigma and be okay with saying, I don't know that I'm okay with what I'm doing.
Well, yeah, because it sort of starts that way, right? You start to feel guilty about the things that you're doing and the amount of alcohol that you're drinking. And I will say, like, I feel as if every time I tell myself, like, I've pulled back from it. I had a night last week where I was able to mix, and even though I woke up the next day feeling like crap, absolutely. And then, got up, walked my dog, and then went back to sleep. I realized, okay, there's a reason why I'm having these conversations. There's a reason why I'm feeling this way, because I shouldn't have been able to have that shot and then had wine and then had a martini and then had, like, I shouldn't have been able to have all of those things and not have been sick.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
to me was something that was like, okay, that's not, I'm
Yeah.
not
That's a
like,
lot.
woo, my tolerance. I'm like, no, that's not good, because I really did feel crappy on Saturday. Even just the little things, and having been an athlete, and I mean, right now I'm back into working out again and stuff. And I'm like, this is counterintuitive to what I want
Yeah.
to do right now with my body. And I know that. And it's not every day, but it was like, it was Friday night. It definitely was Friday night. It wasn't Saturday night, but it was Friday night. Did I drink Saturday by myself at my house while I was cleaning? I sure did. You know, did I drink yesterday? Yes, I did. Should I have? No, there was no reason. I was alone. And I think that's what's in my head right now, is that I'm like, why am I drinking when I'm alone? Like,
Yeah. And I was doing that a lot. A lot. I mean, through COVID, I had to walk my wife that day through the house and show her where all my hiding places are, where I would put the empty bottles so I can get them out of the house.
oh, wow.
Right?
And
And
she
I had to
didn't
pick up
know.
stuff.
She didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd pick up stuff that, that wasn't mine through the industry, right? And make sure I'm bringing something else in, because that's my work. I separated those things. Um, so it's not like I could put them and mix it in with that and be like, no, that's work stuff. And, just the insanity and the juxtaposition of knowing how absurd it is and not being able to reason with yourself to stop it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I beg anybody who has a loved one who's in the midst of it. It's hard. I'll tell you. It's my wife, or to put up with it and be as patient as she was, as long as she was. To be mad at the addiction, the disease, not the person, is a very hard thing to do, and it's completely understandable if you can't separate those as the person who has to deal with it and live with it and watch it. But the person in it, it's just knowing how silly it is, how terrible it is, but not being able to reason with yourself. And this medicine really gave me that clarity, because it shuts off just that the flood in your brain is so powerful to override any other reasoning around it when you get to the point where I was. I tried AA. I think AA is a wonderful program. It does work for a lot of people. I beat myself up a lot about my alcohol. So for me, if I went 6 months sober and drank once, it didn't work for me to say I'm at day zero, because I'm like, if I'm at day zero, then I'm going to go ahead and have fun for a while. And then it's a year later before I touch back base on it.
That makes sense.
Me,
That's relatable.
now it's healthier for me to say, if I were to have a drink tomorrow, will I have a year and a half sober plus 1 day? That's still so much less than I drank in the year and a half previous, right? So get right back on board and keep going. And with this medicine, it doesn't, as long as I took it, it doesn't catapult me into that mindset of more and more and more. Nothing's ever enough. Everything's funnier if I have one more.
Yep.
It is amazing to me how night and day my relationship is with it now.
Well, I was even going to say that, like, your relationship with that, but also just in general, like what you've noticed about life, like that has changed. A lot has changed for you, just how you feel about yourself and how you feel in your body. And
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Yeah, everything has changed. I mean, to get back to my health, to get back to, a place where I feel that I'm not at the end of my life already physically because of what I've done to myself, that, I've been able to reverse a lot of these health problems that I've created for myself. I think it's amazing that we live in a world where there are so many non-alcoholic options for people who want to take the path that we're taking, or that need to. As he was saying about the ritual of injecting the saline, having a non-alcoholic beer, to not have to say to a friend, I'm not drinking right now. In my experience, the friends who want to be like, oh, you're doing that again, I had a lot doing that. And I see now when I talk to them, a lot of it is, not to say for all of them, but a lot of it is projection too. We all,
absolutely.
any of us who have this problem, live with a problem in ourselves for a long time before we start saying out loud that it's a problem. So now when I have somebody like that, I don't let it bother me. I just listen more to them, and I pay a little more attention to them and make sure that I talk a little bit more about my story and how comfortable I am with it in case they want to open that door. And I'm hoping I'm wrong. I really hope that I'm wrong about every single one of them and they're fine. And then everything's great. But I just try and make myself available to anybody who wants to talk about it. Um, yeah, we have all those options, and then you don't have to talk about it. You can get something that looks exactly like what everyone else is drinking. There are so many non-alcoholic wines, de-alcoholic wines, de-alcoholized spirits that you can sit and feel like you're part of the group. You don't feel like an outsider now, and enjoy the party again.
I really like, have you had hop water? It's like that adaptogen.
I've heard of it, but I haven't had that one yet. Athletic Brewing is one of my favorite ones right now for the beers, but
Okay.
um,
And
yeah,
I haven't tried any wines either, but yeah, I do. I think, and this was something I want to ask you. How long was it? So I guess how do you find that balance? And there's certain things that we want to try to we don't want to get too much into like what you do, but
Yeah.
how did you, when you first started, like you said, you had that dinner, you're just like, oh, I don't drink when I'm on the road. And that was it. It was almost like you had this moment where you're like, hey, this is what I'm going to say. And this is how it's going to be. And because I'm hosting.
I was always afraid before because I didn't want to say that I'm not drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to my point before, nobody cares. It was my anxiety and my anxiety that made me think everyone was going to be like, hold on, stop the dinner. I got to talk to you about this. Like, no, who cares? It was my own personal problem with my own personal problem that made it that way. And also, I'm on the road. I'm driving a rental car. I'm driving 2 hours to my hotel. At the end, it makes perfect sense. Everyone will be like, no, I'm working. I'm happy to be here, but this is work and I have to drive to the next gig.
Yeah.
And that ends it. So, of all the years of doing it where I could have just said that, I just let it flood in my head that everyone else, meanwhile, it's everything I knew about my problem that was creating my own guilt that I needed to get ahead of. That I was the one projecting at that point.
That makes a lot of sense.
And people, care so much less than I thought they would. It's one thing I talked to my therapist about, and she just laughed. She's like, yeah, they only care that you're healthy now. They don't care that you're not drinking, and it's true.
Well, you also said it too with, I think a lot of times, like how we say things, like when you say something so definitively where you're just like, oh, I don't work when I'm on the road. When you give people an answer, sometimes I feel like if people get,
no one's going to say that.
Yeah. So when you give them a valid answer, then it also is, but that's also where we're overthinking it too, where it's this, I think for me in my situations, it's been with friends and I'm just like, yeah, so next month I want to try. And I keep doing that thing where I'm like, next month. Like I have to start right at the beginning of the month. I have to have a plan because I'm a planner, but I also need to have steps in place. I need to have what am I going to do when I get home? Because I live alone. I'm single. I'm not even dating anyone right now. So it's sort of this, I don't even have that person to be like, hey, what are you doing? Do you want to come hang out? Because I'm trying not to drink, So I think for me, it's trying to figure out what am I replacing that sort of with? And maybe this is something I need to try.
Yeah, I encourage anybody who feels in the mindset that you're in. It's not addictive, right? And we've got Dr. Brophy on here. That's someone at least to reach out to and say, where can I go to find this prescription? How can you help me?
Yeah.
I would like to take this path.
Yeah.
And I think one thing to consider, and something that I didn't really consider either, is alcohol is not necessary. So it doesn't have to be replaced, right? I understand what you're saying, but for me, if I put it in my head that way, like I don't have to replace with non-alcoholic beer. I like to have the option, for the visual and the ritual, but it's not necessary. It's great. It's still something that I respect. And, I've been lucky to, work with some of the greatest things in the world. And, I have a respect for it. I think it has a place where it belongs. But it's not necessary. So it doesn't have to be replaced. But I see what you're saying. Like, what am I going to do with my time? What is my happy release? What is my stress reliever? What is my reward system now?
Because it is for me, I've been able to go out and just have one glass of wine, right, at dinner, and then I'm fine. I think for me, it's the consistency of my drinking, and it's like every day.
Yeah.
And something about that for me is like, why can't I just wait until I'm going out for a special occasion and have a glass of wine that night and enjoy it and remember what it is to enjoy it? Because I do have an appreciation for, the people who, one of our good friends, right? Yoda, he brews beer. This is what he does for a living. Yeah. And so it's like, I have a respect for that, for people that's what they do. And like, especially with wine, like I was in Italy last summer and I had some of the best wine, but I didn't get drunk. Like I wasn't, it wasn't the same because it was almost this. So to me, it's sort of a sign that like, there's other things that are kind of imbalanced maybe for me right now, but I do want to be able to not have that like craving and not feel like I need to have a drink. I need to have a drink. I need to have a drink. It's like, no, I don't need to have a drink.
Yeah.
So this whole thing is like really making me be like,
yeah. I think anybody that's having that mindset, like you said, when you know that you want to get ahead and get a control of how you're feeling about things. I know from my experience that this changes that relationship. And I believe that anybody who gets Naltrexone, tries it, takes it on a regular basis, perhaps the first few weeks, and the studies show that for the first few months, you'll probably drink roughly the same. That will begin to taper down and you'll get to the point where you go home and you'll be in bed watching Netflix where you're like, I didn't even think about that glass of wine. Mm-hmm. You might have thought about it in the afternoon when your trigger happened, when your stress trigger or your celebration moment, something great happened and you're like, I'm gonna have that glass of wine. This is gonna be great. But it's the nagging, the impulse doesn't remain anymore for me. And I truly believe that if somebody is in that same mentality and they want to curb at least the amounts, if not completely, you're going to get there. This is something that will absolutely get you there because it begins to break that chemical tie to the substance and the happy hormones. So anybody listening who's feeling that exact same way, the way you are, the way that I did, I encourage you to talk to your doctor. Give it a shot. There's no harm to this, to trying it at least. It's great paired with therapy if you feel like you're in that mindset where your alcohol is a little bit out of control or maybe controlling you. I hesitate to say magic pill, but for me in a year and a half, it's been my magic pill. It's definitely saved my life. So
this episode is brought to you by R.W. McDonald and Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Thank you to our sponsors for your support on our first season of the Alter Eagle podcast. Well, like I said, I'm really proud of you. And I think this is, I've always seen Joyce, your wife. Is it okay if I say, okay if I say her name? Okay. I don't know if we wanted to I think we said Miles, so we already said, which, by the way, probably one of the cutest kids I've ever seen in my life.
Free on Friday.
Yeah. Wait, what?
3 on Friday.
3 on Friday? Wow.
He's the best.
He really is cool. He's a cool little kid. I've only met him once, so.
We'll get him back soon.
So Joyce, to me, always is very level-headed, right? She's happy. To me, she's like, got it together. So I think that the fact that you're able to open up, obviously that's important in a relationship, to be able to say, hey, listen, here's what's going on, and have that person like stand by you. But I'm sure there was a little bit of a period there. So for anyone who maybe is, let's say in your position, right, is married or in a relationship and is trying to, what would you say? How was it for you that you were just like, listen, this person means everything to me. This tiny person means everything to me. And in order to save these, I have to like save myself first, right? It's like it's the oxygen thing in the airplane, right? It's like, before you help out, like put the oxygen mask on yourself first before helping others. So do you feel comfortable talking about that at all? Or
no, I do. The morning that I finally went up to her and told her, I need help. And that was more of a rip the Band-Aid off. It was like, if I don't just say this before I think too much about it, I'm going to do the same thing again and again and again. But I know leading up to that, we had not had, I don't know exactly where she was in her head, but I do know that she had told me, she's like, if you can't stop this, I can't let him grow up watching you do this. And that's fair. And I fought with it in my head, and I knew I needed help. I didn't want him to watch me do that. And I knew if it came to that, and she was going to leave and take him, I don't think I could bring myself to fight for him. How am I going to bring him to live in a home with me separate when I can't control my drinking? I was going to have to say, for his better good, I got to give him up till I can quit. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to do that. So I knew I had to quit before we got there. And that moment, like all of that flooded, just the thought of not waking up with him running around screaming every single morning. It was just too much. And I was just like, whatever it took. If she said, I'm calling right now and you're leaving, I was going. If she said, you're going to the hospital to clean up and you're going wherever they send you, I was going. Whatever we needed that morning is what I was doing. And before I could think about it and before I could convince myself to have anything else. So I would say to anybody, it is probably the hardest, most frightening, horrific thing you can do, because you don't know what's going to come of it. But it can be the start of the end of the problem. Mm-hmm. For me, it was, nobody's going to help. Nobody can help you fully until you can just say, I can't do it. I need help. At the beginning of your podcast, you said you called your mom and you said, I'm not doing well.
I'm not okay. Yeah.
Okay. I need to come home. That's what made me say, I was in the car listening, crying, thinking of you. Oh. And I was like, I got to text her as soon as I get back. Just something, because it meant so much to me, because I know that feeling. To say, I'm not okay. This is not your fault either. And I was putting it on her. I was putting everything on her.
I think a lot of people do that. They beat themselves up, and almost, a hard thing to do is to put yourself in this position where you think, I could lose this person, right? By telling them this information and recognizing that I have a problem. And that's a scary thing. But at the end of the day, when you're, regardless of what the relationship status is or how far along the relationship is, it's this concept of you can't pour from an empty glass. Yeah. And no matter how much you want this right here, right, you've got to make sure that you're still taking care of. It's hard. It's a hard concept. And I feel like where we are in our lives right now, it's something that a lot of people are being faced with.
Losing a parent young, I thought of Miles a lot. And what effect would it have on him as he grows up to learn, if something did happen to me, that he lost his dad? Because how else would he put it in his own head, but that I felt that alcohol was more important than him? That's not true. But how else is he supposed to internalize that as he grows up, And I had a lot of questions about, what is rock bottom? We always say everyone has to hit rock bottom. Rock bottom really is 6 feet under. Right. That's the lowest you can go. So yeah, why was I waiting to hit rock bottom? It's too late. Right. So your rock bottom is wherever you decide to finally say, I need help. So just raise your rock bottom, just pick it up somewhere, that you're all, just bring it to where you are and go ask for help. Just say you need help.
It's something that I was writing a few weeks ago, and I was doing a little research on end of life, people that work in palliative care with people who are at the end of their life and their regrets. And the number one regret is that they worried so much about what other people thought about them that they didn't stay true to themselves. Yeah. And I think this topic in particular is exactly that. I mean, it starts at a young age, right? When you're an adolescent, you go through peer pressure and, everyone's doing it.
In relationship with people and what they're going to think about us, and people, thinking that on their deathbed, I thought too much about, one of my biggest issues is, my parents are going to think that they did something wrong. They didn't. I had an incredible life, 2 incredible loving parents. They barely drink. When they drink, they have fun with it. My mom, as soon as she gets a buzz, she's done for 2 hours till it's late. There was nothing there's nothing of my life or childhood that's like, nah, this is why you drink. Mm-hmm. It was nothing but the environment I was in and the fact that physiologically I just love it. So it was like, great, always down to party. If somebody was having a drink, I'm 10 minutes early. And it was 100% me. So I had to realize that they're not going to care. I know they're going to care because of my parents. I'm going to care one day if Miles has to come to me and say the same thing. And I realized that me making this decision will also open the door that when Miles is older, I can say, hey, this is why daddy doesn't drink. This is why you've never seen me have a drink, because for your first year and a half, I missed out on too much. So go have fun, but I can be the first person you call. There's no judgment. There's no shame. Just be careful.
And that is one of the biggest topics, is the stigma behind it, and even the stigma behind the paths that people take. I mean, I think those are opening up, but for you talking about this, I think is huge, because I haven't had anyone come on and I didn't even know about this. And Dr. Brophy's email, he was like, oh my gosh, yes, I want to talk. Like, he was super excited to talk about it because he did share the story of his brother and how his brother's alive because of methadone.
Yeah.
And how we need to explain to people that these resources, these medical assisted treatment is helping people stay alive. It's helping people function. It's helping people go back to work and take care of their families and feel good about themselves. There are people who choose to be completely abstinent, right? That people that are like, they're the straight and narrow. They don't want any substances. I've talked to people who were able to just realize and they were able to quit, right?
Yeah. And great. That's amazing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I did, when I first moved to Boston, I did like a 30-day sort of detox thing. And I also was insane where I cut out like dairy and soy and coffee and gluten.
You also rode a bicycle across the country. You know?
I'm a little, I'm extreme.
You do a lot of amazing things.
Well, thank you. I'm in a place right now where I've always wanted to be a parent. I was with someone who I thought also understood the importance of that to me, and that there was like an actual clock, and I was like, yeah, it's starting to tick, and and then that ended. And then when I was in Boston, I went through 2 IUIs on my own with a donor, which we talked about, because I came to you and Yoda to tell you I was doing that.
And I was like, it's amazing.
Because I kind of needed, like, I had people in my life that I was like, I kind of need to know that, like, if I were to just randomly be like, hey, because I knew you and Joyce were wanting to start a family, right? I knew that. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to tell you, because I was like, okay, you're going to be a parent. Maybe our kids can like hang out when you like come back and stuff. And I just wanted to have those friends that really could just keep it straight with me. And so sharing that with you was important. And then it didn't work, right? It didn't work. So then I went through this whole and then left a career of 12 years and then so on and so forth. And now I'm back in Butler. That was never the plan.
Yeah.
But doing things that I think are really important. And what's interesting about this podcast is I have had people say to me, so when are you moving on from addiction? And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm just realizing, like, here is another resource for someone out there. And for me, I didn't even know. Yeah. And I'm going to be honest with people that are listening that, this is something that I'm thinking that I want to start to step into the sobriety pool a little bit. I do. Like, seriously.
I'm very curious in a year if how many people may give this a shot and reach out if there's a follow-up episode to see real life people who chose, hey, I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot, see what it does to change my relationship with alcohol. Because it really does have such a powerful effect. I'm probably one of the more extreme in that I am 80% of my week surrounded by alcohol. The consumption of it, the talking about it, the selling of it, and to have this so shut off. But I think an important thing is, and I say it ad nauseum, for someone like me, you have to want to be done. For somebody who just wants to minimize it, you have to want that forever. You have to know that you're going to take the pill. You can't just go a weekend and be like, you know what, it's a bachelorette weekend. It's a bachelor weekend. I'm going to go. It's just going to have to be part of the change because the chemical switch is so strong. It can come right back on. The learned behavior is relearned so quickly.
Yeah. And I realized when I did it in Boston, when I did the 30 days, it was like a 30-day detox. And it could have been many of the things that I cut out. I mean, I cut sugar and coffee and alcohol and soy and dairy and gluten. I cut out a lot of things all at once. It was intense. But I think it was because I had a start and a stop.
Yeah.
And right at the end of my 30 days, like my 30 days was ending on a Monday, and I went on a last minute trip for the weekend to Chicago. Some of my girlfriends from California, we were flying to see a friend of ours from California that had moved to Chicago, like right when I moved. And so with our family, so we all decided to go to Chicago and visit. And the whole weekend they're like, oh, come on, come on. And I was like, no, like I'm staying true to this. I said, if anything, our last dinner, it would be like Sunday night, and Sunday's like my 31st day, you know? But I need to stick this out for the weekend to just be mindful of it. It's just something I really wanted to do. And we got to Sunday dinner, and I did decide, because I was like, it's my last dinner with my girlfriends before I fly back to Boston. And I decided to have pizza, and I think I had like 2 glasses of red wine. And it was different. I appreciated it a different way. I wasn't doing it to like get drunk.
Yeah.
I had that first sip of wine, and it was this sort of like, wow, I want to like appreciate this glass of wine and this piece of pizza. And I mean, I was like dairy, gluten. I was like, everything was like bam, bam, bam all at once, but it did sort of make me realize like I actually felt a lot better when I wasn't drinking, like a lot better just overall. And I want to feel that again because, to your point of I rode my bicycle cross country. I got big plans, friend. I have big plans.
Yeah. And for someone like me that, if you drink this way, that it gets in the way.
It does.
I use an app called, and I encourage this, I Am Sober. It's a great community. There's a little, and it's every addiction you can put in there. And I think it's an important thing to say. There's, people can be addicted to exercise, to everything. It's only the few that we stigmatize. So, I love using this as a great community. You can post how you're feeling. You can read other people's thoughts. You're encouraged not to discourage anybody, talk about using, show any photos of using, give any medical advice, but just to have people, and then you can start following people, see their journey. It's a little bit heartbreaking because you'll see people start to taper off, and you realize that they fell off and they stopped using it again. And go look for them. You can find them again, but it also counts how many days you're sober, whether you want to see that number or not. Your money, you can tell it how much money you spend a day.
Yep.
I've saved $12,000 just on a conservative average of what I assumed that I wasted, whether it was on alcohol or eating garbage food because I thought a burger is going to sober me up on the way home.
Thank you.
It counts the calories, 1.3 million calories between just the alcohol plus the food I was eating. That's not even counting that. To put into perspective. And then I'd said it was probably 4 to 6 hours a day. So then it's counting the hours I've saved. I've gained 5-6 months of my life because I'm present in my life. I'm present for my son. I'm present for my wife. I'm present for myself. That gives me so much more things to do. And then that becomes, success begets more success. It begets, more effort, more energy. And when you start to see the success of your work, that becomes now the dopamine. That becomes the flood of excitement of having the time, the energy, the happiness to do things, and it starts replacing it. So it has a secondary effect for me of reintroducing myself back into my life in a positive way.
So what else? And I'm kind of I don't know, we can start wrapping up, yeah. I think. I'm like, whoa. What else do you think has been a positive too? I mean, obviously getting up in the morning, and you were saying, Miles, kids get up really early, right? And they just want to come in there and jump into bed with you, and you want to be present for that. Like those moments, those are moments. But what other things have you kind of noticed aside from, or maybe even things that have enriched that, like relationship with him, with Joyce, with all as a family?
Yeah, rebuilding that trust. My anxiety level has changed dramatically. I mean, I still have my own generalized anxiety. So much of it was seeded and stemming from my alcohol. Being able to manage my life that way, I'm much more connected to my work. I'm much more organized in my life. I exercise again. I know that my son will never catch me hiding bottles, stumbling around the room. I have friends who, they joke and they don't have the problem I have. And they're like, oh, their kids are getting older and they'll say, oh, daddy, you've been drinking. They can smell it. Miles is going to get to the age where he knows the smell of alcohol. He doesn't realize and start to associate daddy's silly behavior with, so I don't stress about what kind of example I'm setting for him. I know that what I'm setting is a healthy example. I have a better relationship with food because as I was gaining weight and drinking too much, and that's my own personal body problems, that I'm not constantly yo-yo dieting and saying having a different plate of food because I'm not going to eat what's there. I mean, the reality is the alcohol was killing my health, but I'm pretending that it's what I'm putting in my body. So I stopped dieting and I just eat whatever I want, and I'm healthier than I've ever been. I have a better relationship with every aspect of my life. Because I finally took steps of just being vulnerable enough to say, I'm the problem in this house. I'm the problem to myself. I realized I was starting to justify myself, that I was trying to convince myself that Joyce was my drinking problem, that she barely drinks. She drinks like a regular person. She might have one, might not. Could care less, take it or leave it. And in my head, I was like, oh, I mean, if she just didn't think it was bad that I was having one, then I would have it in front of everybody. But instead, I have to hide it. And like, that's absurd. And like, thank God I never crossed the bridge of actually saying that out loud. That was my ridiculous,
Oh, yeah. That was that was what was going on in your brain.
My own problem, my internalizing my own problem, and trying to project it onto everybody around me, and it's not my fault, And finally, just being able to say, I have a problem, and it has changed every aspect of my life. And the people I say it to, if it leaves the door open to them, if they know somebody, I have multiple people who the door is wide open for either them or their family members. Give me a call. We can talk. I'll just explain to you where I am and what this has done for me. And I encourage, if somebody needs somebody to be the first person to say I have a problem to, then my phone line is open.
Well, and that's what a lot of people feel that they need, right? I wasn't to a point where I felt that I needed that. I think that it just with, the conversation we had a week ago of losing a friend and kind of having that realization that like life is too short, and we are at that age where that's starting to happen. Yeah. And taking our health more seriously is something that we need to do. Like if I wake up and with my history of being an athlete and a dancer and a very intense person when it comes to that stuff, and waking up and like my knees are aching and like my feet are swollen, and I'm just like, I know what this is from. Like I know what this is from. It's from the drinking and the crap that I was eating after the drinking. And that's part of it for me too, because I'm really conscious when it comes to what I'm eating, to the point of where I'm like, I've got so many recipes of like the healthy things and all the things that are in there and the vitamins, and I'm a supplement person, but none of that's going to matter if I'm drinking every single day. And then every once in a while, when I say every once in a while, like 2 times a week, eating some crap food that's just like not good for my body.
Yeah. But if you can remove the alcohol and then remove that crap that comes along with it, you can also rebalance everything else you do and stop being compulsive about your regular food every day.
Yeah.
And then sit down and enjoy it. If tonight's fried chicken, it's fried chicken. Have less of it.
Yeah, like right? I'm still gonna be like, I'm gonna have pizza. I'm still gonna, like I'm not one of those. I'm definitely not one of those girls that's like, I'm never gonna eat pizza again, and I'm always gonna have just rice and broccoli and grilled chicken.
Yeah.
Like no, I'm still gonna have nachos every once in a while with cheese and meat and jalapenos, but just not weekly.
Yeah.
And not.
Being conscious and understanding one's relationship with alcohol. I mean, I'm not a teetotaler until it comes to somebody like me. You just be aware of your own brain chemistry and how you are with it. If it's something that you love enough that you're going to continue to overindulge and you can't control, be brave enough to ask somebody for help.
Absolutely.
I hope that, everybody will take that to heart. We have great resources that I sent you. I hope there's a way you can put them up there. There's a great TED Talk with this actress, Claudia. She talks about her experience with Naltrexone, her drinking habits and how they change. She narrates the book, The Cure for Alcoholism by Dr. Sinclair. There's a lady named Katie Lane who works for the Sinclair Method Clinic. She's got a couple great podcasts. So there's a lot of really good resources to watch and listen to. And naltrexone's finding its way in a lot of other medicines. It's in a lot of diet medicines because it has that disconnect of the chemistry for overeaters. They're using it for gambling. They're starting to study it for all these other addictive qualities because of the exact way it works with our brains. So we're going to see, I hope we're going to see it in a more mainstream way and more accessible and creating a lot more help for a lot more people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, being able to have something that gives you that like glimmer of hope where you're like, I can do this. Sometimes it's just that little teeny tiny thing. I mean, I've tried to do the cold turkey, right? I think that a lot of the other resources I've looked into and they just don't seem to line up with what the path that I want to take, right?
So also, you've already created the chemical pathway for this. Cold turkey's not going to work.
Yeah.
The thought that if a commercial comes on, or you're watching a movie where they're drinking, you're out with friends, if the environment is there. And I remember being a bartender and somebody working at a restaurant, somebody snapping at me because I offered them a seat at the bar while we were waiting for the restaurant to open, that they don't drink, I can't be there. And in my mind at the time, I was like, then I'm just not going to serve you a drink. Just tell me not to serve you something, no problem. And now I get it. Like, they could not physically be in that room with the bottles. They didn't want the trigger.
Yeah.
And I completely understand that. So if somebody is already has that neural pathway where it's going to happen, cold turkey is going to be a very, very hard fight. It always was. 3 days was a massive success for me.
And I've done that, right? Where you do so many days and then you get to the fourth day and you're like, oh, I'll just have a drink. And then it ends up just being a total blowout. And you're like,
it's like, I get it. I figured it out in 3 days. I can have it now. Now I understand.
I can manage this.
Yeah.
And then you wake up the next day and you're like, it's 9. I wanted to be up at 7. And I get mad at myself because I'm like, no, I had things that I wanted to do. And I have a hard time with letting go of that, like my schedule. That's just something I struggle with when I'm especially this getting back into shape. And when I say getting back into shape, I mean the 2 years since I left Soul Cycle to pretty much when I moved back here, I like wasn't working out. Like, I think I maybe worked out 4 times in those 2 years.
Yeah.
It was not good. And I knew this is going to suck. When I have to start to get back into this and when I have to start moving my body again, it's going to hurt. Because I'd gone through injuries and I'd gone through rehab many, many times in my years of being a professional dancer and then I learned like that's a really tough thing.
Yeah, I started running again in January. I was like, all right, I'll drop miles off at school and I'll run. And that's 4 miles. Yeah, I'll just do that.
And you were like, what was I thinking?
I did marathons back in the day and half marathons and yeah, no. I mean, I'm up to work yourself up, at the end of the first week and a half where I've pushed myself through 3 and 4 mile runs each day. I'm like, well, now I have plantar fasciitis and I have a heel spur and I have shin splints and I might have lost a foot back there. It's just mentally, I'm like, yeah, I'm 20, but you don't realize what all the things that have happened along my alcoholism and everything you let slip away. Mm-hmm. How long of a time that is, but how fast that adds up and how much that adds up. So yeah, it's a hard ride getting back on top of it.
Sort of testament to your dedication of wanting to make a difference for your son and for your wife, but then knowing like that you had to do it for yourself too, And a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people sort of find this place where they cling to one or the other, right? And then that's where they end up just continuing down this path. I'm really proud of you. And thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this. To help your buddy in the community. I think it's incredible. I think it's really amazing.
Thank you. I hope it does. And I think it's important for us to keep talking about it. I mean, and it's all tied into mental health too, because, and that's sort of something I want to keep going, keep talking about, because it's important for us to continue to make sure people know that they're not alone. So, yeah, you're the best, man.
You too.
Steelers football. Yeah.
Coming up. It's good to see your face and chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode. And be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Follow us on Instagram at Ultra Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.